All right, meet the neighborhood today. We have a very special guest, a gentleman that I worked with for about 200 years in the radio world, and best known for his humor, his antics. I'm going to say zaniness, that counts, right? And your hidden musical ability. Welcome, Jay Sharp. How are you?
Thank you, Joel C. Scott. It's a pleasure to be here.
I'm
good. How are you?
I'm good. We were just commenting off camera about our respective haircuts. What is going on with the new Jay Sharp semi-retired haircut? Because you got some forehead there, my friend.
Yeah, there's more forehead showing than ever before.
I
The
got
color
thinness.
is drained right out of the beard. Oh yeah, I see a little bit there, but good color. You've got great color under there.
So well, I'm also in a poorly lit room, so that does help too.
That always helps. Yeah, bad lighting is good for me.
Let's go back to, I want to go back to the beginning of your radio career. Do you remember the first time you decided, hey, maybe this is something I should look into to get into radio?
Yes, I do. I remember. I didn't really put the puzzle pieces in place, but I was always, you were probably the same way, a kid that recorded on the portable cassette machines and loved doing skits and doing imitations of radio shows.
My aunt, true story, my aunt Sherry brought me a cassette tape one time from when I was about 9 years old. And my cousin Jason and I used to do this thing where we would do a thing called Interview with the Man with 1,000 Voices. And we would ask a question, and then we would play a clip of a song that answered the question. So it sounded
that's hilarious.
Sounded like we were interviewing this guy who had all different voices. And it was, when you're 8, you do stuff like that. But then, and you're right, taping off the radio, calling in for songs, requests and stuff like that, never even crossed my path until later in life. So, and then
I called up a buddy his mom answered the phone and she said, she just out of the blue said, you kind of have a radio voice. Have you ever considered doing that? No, I hadn't. So it seemed like, I think I was kind of floating along, not knowing what to do. And I was like, oh, you can take this in college. You can actually pursue this. I'm going to do it. That's kind of how it happened.
So when you went to school, like what was, because I remember going to broadcast school, I was terrified of the equipment because I have zero technical ability. Did any of that stuff come natural to you, or did it take a bit to learn?
The technical stuff is scary. I found that scary. I have more issues with, I really hate public speaking. I really have bad stage fright. So
we all do.
Really?
Oh my God, dude. I've been, we've hosted stuff for years. You and I have hosted events together.
Yeah.
Like it's a 10-minute warm up in the back so I don't have a panic attack in front of people. I mean, after I'm up there for 5 or 6 minutes, I'm comfy. The build up to it is terrifying.
Oh yeah. Yeah. Once I'm up there, I'm okay. But the technical aspect, I think that's always going to be, was nerve wracking right up until I was, finished with radios, because the equipment is always changing and the technology is changing. And I think you and I both started with, I was just transitioning into CDs at the time. So I learned how to play vinyl.
My first shifts in my first radio gig in Ottawa. My first radio gig in Ottawa, I played vinyl and CD. And then after that, it was pretty much CD. But I learned to edit on tape, reel to reel.
Yeah, I did the same.
I think you and I were both the generation of like reel to reel tape transitioning to digital and cutting on a computer. And so was your first gig at the Wolf part-time? Like, did you start right there, or were you somewhere else before that?
I started there before the Wolf. I was part of the Wolf launch. So I started I think it was about a year before the Wolf launch. So it was 980 checks.
Right.
And got it straight out of Humber College. And they had, I tried to do my internship there, and they ended up hiring me for overnights.
So you started when there was an overnight shift.
Yeah, when there was an overnight shift. And I was still terrified.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
It's scary to be in a real radio station.
Did you have any regular wacko callers
weekends,
overnight?
overnights for a long time?
Did you have any regular callers?
Oh yeah, I still, yeah, overnight callers. I would have a guy that worked up the road at the gas station overnights and would call in at the same time to get his dedication to his girlfriend, Paige. I always still remember that. You get to know it's a small group of people that are listening from midnight till 6, so you get to know everybody pretty well when they call.
Oh, I know. And what's hilarious is, like, I can't remember my postal code, but you can remember Paige, who called in 20 years ago.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So from overnights, then did the transition go to evenings?
Yeah, I was bounced all over the place. I think I went to evenings, and then I went to afternoon drive for a while, and then back to evenings. And I kind of settled into evenings and did like an alternate, started to do shows, package shows and stuff like that.
Yeah, but you were sort of the originator of one of the all-time, I'm going to say one of the longest running shows in Central Ontario radio with the alternate route.
Yeah, the alternate route was totally into bands that were breaking at the time, which have become really big bands. It was fun to be part of that scene, Pearl Jam and Nirvana. And the fact that I was given free license to package the show, come up with the ideas, be music director of it, even if it was just an hour or 2 hours, it was great. It ran, I think, 14 years. It was fun.
Right. Because there's an entire generation of kids that grew up on the alternate route because it was stuff that was just kind of outside the mainstream, but eventually became the mainstream. And I think that was kind of what made it cool, right? Like, and the fact that you had full reign over that, I think, speaks to maybe your talents and why you never became a program director.
Yeah, I think that idea scared me a little bit. Music director I could handle, but program director and dealing with all the messy people and the politics and all that stuff, or presentations. Ooh, having to give presentations, that'd be awful.
Do you remember your transition to mornings? Was it exciting? Was it scary? Was it overwhelming? Because when they give you the morning show, it's kind of like saying, okay, you're going to hold the rudder of the ship and you got to keep us going. And the morning radio at that time was where the bulk of ratings, attention, and financial well-being was held, because that set the tone for the rest of the day in the business. Because it was a much different time back then. Now they're finding afternoon drive obviously carries a lot of that weight too. But what do you remember about the transition to mornings from that standpoint?
I was really loving doing the evenings and alternate route thing, but I remember the general manager pulled me aside one night at it was a gig or a bar downtown, and said that they were looking at, he asked me why I applied for the morning show because it had just come open. And I said, because I don't want to wake up at that time of day. And he said, well, I just, so you know, if you do want it, you've got my backing. And so then I just felt awful because I was kind of like, I kind of have to do this. This is, if I want to move up in the business, this is the next step. So I kind of felt like I had to grow up really quickly from the evening guy that was out partying all the time and playing the new music to, I have to get up at 4 a.m.
Yeah.
Ooh.
You were going to bed at that time.
Yeah, pretty much.
Because if I'm not, like, you would get off your show and then go buzz by one of the bars for last call, right?
Oh yeah. It was Trashateria. I would get off, finish on the air at 11:30 or whatever, and go to Trashateria and hang out there till 2 a.m. And it was a fun time. It was a fun time for sure. I didn't think of the morning show with such weight behind it, like you mentioned. I was aware of that, but I tried not to think about it because it was scary enough as it was just making that transition. So I just
I had the misfortune of taking over from a legend in Kingston. Greg Hunter did the morning show at Fly FM and CKLC for 28 years. And my program director, they wanted to make a change and move him to another station. And they asked me to take over the morning show. And I said, you want me to replace the Great White Hunter? Like, it's a bit like stepping in the chair after Roger Ashby at Chum, right?
Right.
It doesn't matter what I say, it's not going to be Greg. Like, he's just that good at what he did for that long. And I said, you want to hang the financial well-being of this radio station on Me.
It's
And
scary.
the funny part was, like, I had a great co-host. We had a great show. We were #1 for a long time in Kingston. And like a year into the gig, and we got billboards up all over town. A year into the gig, people are calling up going, "When's Greg back from holidays?" So anytime you think your
Makes
ego
you
is
feel
getting a little
good.
comfortable, it's like,
Yeah.
yeah, right. Nobody cares. So it was a
I was
humbler.
lucky. I was lucky in the sense that we had a bunch of morning guys come and go really fast, relatively fast. I think Brad Dryden came in, Downtown Brown was there, Brad Dryden, Griff Henderson, and they'd stay a couple of years. So that nobody really settled in that much. And when I took over, John McFadden was still doing the news. So there was still a bit of a transition. He had been doing it for years up to that point, I think.
Yeah. And because those guys were all legends, right? Like, and when I think back to that time when you guys were first launching the Wolf too, like the legend of John Badham, who was the voice of the Wolf for I don't know how many years. What was your relationship like with Badham?
I loved Badham. He was a great guy. He was a man. He's a man from another time.
Totally.
He is from the Mad Men area.
Right.
He would tell these great stories of working in Toronto, and many of them I can't share here, but they were good stories.
Right.
And he was a rascal, he was a great guy. I really enjoyed him. And working in the mornings with him in the same building all the time is great.
You also worked in the same building with a couple of guys who have gone on to become lifelong friends of yours, John Eaton and Mike Melnick, who, if you talk to both of these gentlemen when you're not in the room, there's an equal amount of affection and love, and then bane of their existence, because you're known as a bit of a prankster, shall we say. And
yes,
you've caused Mr. Melnick, when Mike Melnick and you were doing mornings together at the Wolf and Cruise, you caused him a lot of grief, like fun grief, but I'm surprised he doesn't have some form of PTSD, because he was on guard for 20 years.
He was like a cat in a room in a room of rocking chairs. He was always skittish, wondering what was going to happen next. And he called me, what did he called me? I was his Cato from the
OJ
TV
trial
show Green Hornet, I think it is.
Oh, okay, sorry.
No, Cato, going back to the 60s with he was the guy that would pop out and attack the Green Hornet all the time, just to keep his skills sharp. So Mike called me his Cato.
Oh my God.
Because it's going to happen. Letting people into his studio and when he was on the air, and planting a fart machine in the studio, and then a remote control one that I could sit in the other room and fire off.
Did you not put a fart machine in the studio for Melnick when he was interviewing the mayor one time?
I did it so many times I can't remember. I'm sure it was the mayor. Yeah, there was probably one with the mayor, but there was a lot. There was numerous.
I thought Mike told a story about having Mayor Sylvia Sutherland in one day to have this like serious conversation, and you put the remote control fart machine in the studio behind him. So as they're talking, like you're looking through the window, firing the button off, and the two of them are looking around, and Mike's going.
Yeah, and I learned how to time it so that if Mike was talking, I would fire it so only his guest would hear. So he wouldn't be aware that they heard a fart. So he would be talking to them, and they'd sit there going, I can't believe Mike Melnick just did that in front of me. I'm into hysterics. Or I remember one guy, I forget who it was. He thought it was Badham, because Badham finished up his news and got up on Hometown Radio, 980 Cruise. And John didn't hear it because he had his headphones on, so he's carrying on talking to this guy who thinks he just ripped one.
Because I remember when you and I worked together at Pineridge Broadcasting, we had like a window separating us with the two studios for people that have never been there. You somehow got control of my talkback button, so that you could hit the talkback, and while things were going on, like we would get whatever it was you were saying from the talkback. And so everything from fart noises to sound effects to jingles, we'd be in the middle of an interview or a guest or like doing a bit back and forth, and all of a sudden in our headphones you'd hear
I forgot.
And I'd look over and you'd be like bent over in hysterics because the two of us would be going like looking over and you're killing yourself laughing. And I couldn't fight back because I couldn't do it back the other way.
I forgot all about that. One of the funniest ones was with Melnick. And this was actually, we did it together. It was I think it was a Halloween event they were doing like out on the street, and they were raising money. And one of the chief of the fire department, fire chief, came in to use the washroom, and Mike and I had put dry ice in the urinal. So what happened by ice, if you add water or any liquid to it, the smoke just starts to pour out. So we waited till the fire chief went in there, waited 30 seconds to look in and just see all this fog rolling out, him standing at the urinal going, what the hell is going on?
Oh my God, that is awesome.
They were fun times. Yeah, they were fun times.
When you think back to that job.
And then we did a radio show in between.
Yeah, you're right. Somewhere in the middle, there was a radio show. I just have visions of Mike walking in the studio every day, just exhausted, like, made it through another one.
Oh, yeah. And it would go home with him. He said one time he was sitting in the living room and Donna was doing the dishes, and it's about 9, 8 at night. And she goes, Mike, there's pencil in your thermos. He goes, what? Oh, Jay. She goes, oh, okay. No. It was just it must have been Jay. That makes sense.
It just became part of their regular day-to-day.
Yeah.
That something possibly bad could happen.
Yeah.
So when it came to that, like the Wolf was such a hub for so long of everything musical in town. Do you have any recollections of great concert experiences or artists that you got to meet and talk to, or anybody that stands out as a memorable type moment? Because the radio is such a weird job that you take relatively ordinary people, and we tend to be able to discuss things with rather extraordinary people who do extraordinary things at times, and we get to meet really interesting people, right? Like we get to meet really from not just from the music world, but from the community, from sponsors or fundraisers, like just people with really great stories. And I'm wondering if any of those come to mind, especially when you're doing the alternate route. Did anybody come to mind?
With the alternate route, doing a lot of different band interviews, I'm trying to think, interviewing the Tragically Hip and different bands at the time. I can't remember who I've interviewed from the alternate route, but from some of the cool people I remember that have stuck with me was the guys from 3 Days Grace when they were just starting out. I remember getting into radio thinking it would be so cool to come across a band as they're starting to happen. And that's what happened.
Yeah.
The guys from 3 Days Grace, they were Groundswell at the time and came in with their tape, and I loved it. And, that was a cool experience. But Kim Mitchell came to the studio one time and spent the morning show with me, the entire 4 hours. And I was nervous, not just because it was Kim Mitchell, but I had met Kim Mitchell a couple of times before, and I didn't find him to be that warm or friendly. So I didn't know how I was going to do with 4 hours. And he couldn't have been a nicer guy. He couldn't have been warmer. He couldn't have been more interesting and great sense of humor. And it was shortly after that he went to Q. And I thought, I wonder if he had such a blast that he thought this would be a fun thing to look into, as a sideline. But that always stuck out with me because he was exactly the opposite of what I was going in expecting. And
I can remember working as a kid. I worked at the Pines in Bridgenorth, and we helped out with security with a bunch of stuff. And I remember doing a Kim Mitchell show, and like an hour or so before the show, we're all milling in the parking lot. The lineup's out front, and guys are checking IDs and stuff. And this guy pulls up like in a Pontiac Bonneville with a pink hat on, with the peak flipped up like this. And he's like, hey guys, anywhere to park? And I'm like, you're Kim Mitchell. You can park wherever you want. You're the band. he got out and did the show, hopped in his Pontiac Bonneville and drove back to Collingwood that night.
That's amazing.
And he killed it. Like it was amazing. Right. And you think, there's a certain talent in that, I think too. And
Yeah.
When you come across folks like that, it is pretty memorable. We had a similar experience with Ronnie Hawkins during the flood relief concert. I remember thinking, he hosted the show with us one time for 4 hours. And I remember thinking to myself during the show, like, your friend was John Lennon. Like, you go to Bob Dylan's cottage for fun. Like, the guys that sort of created music as we know it are your contemporaries, your buddies that you can hang out with. And I just always found that kind of surreal when you come across somebody like that. Because, you know, prior to that, I'm not sure I could have told you 3 Ronnie Hawkins songs. And then just this dearth of history and amazing storytelling, because he's such a compelling character to listen to.
He's such a fascinating character. And like, I mean, Bill Clinton came to his party when he party in Toronto. Like, he's a legend. He's amazing.
Yeah.
Man, I actually envy you, because how in all my travels never met Ronnie Hawkins.
He told a great story.
He was in the studio with Melnick a few times, but I never actually met him.
Larger than life.
Which is crazy.
Just larger than life, big persona, big voice, friendly as you can imagine, and just loves every minute of life. It was so cool. So
that's really cool.
Now, do you remember the transition from the Wolf to joining us at Pineridge Broadcasting, and do you remember how that all came together? Because I remember how it came together, and I was frankly a little terrified.
You were terrified, really?
Oh my God, that first lunch we had. Oh my God.
Oh, I've got another call coming through.
Of course you do. You're Jay Sharp.
Did that interrupt your video feed, or can I keep talking and just ignore that?
The video disappeared. Your audio.
Oh, it did?
Yeah.
Oh. Hold on.
Technical difficulties.
I'm fixing it.
So do you remember that first meeting?
Oh, yeah. So I totally remember it, because it was on a weekend. I think it was a weekend, and I was in bed still, and we had some friends over, and I remember being the last one to get out of bed, and Sue poking her head in the room and saying, "There's a Joel Scott from Star 93.3 on the phone for you." And I was like, "Yes, I know Joel, but I don't think I've ever met him before. What the heck? What's he doing?" And then
we'd never met before.
We'd never met before. And I remember that phone call. I remember that, and we had a great chat. And I think we went to Boston Pizza to meet after that. To
went for lunch at Boston Pizza, and I said, "Hey, what are you doing?" And you're like, "Nothing, hanging out."
Just hanging out.
Because I think the story of you becoming the morning guy at Classic Rock to me is one of my favorite sort of points in my career, because I remember at that meeting I said, "Hey, we needed someone to fill in for vacation swing stuff." And I talked to our management team, and they're like, "Is there anybody around in the area that's got some experience that we don't really have to train, that we can just bring in part-time?" And I'm like, "Jay Sharp is available." Because things at the Wolf had ended, and you were sort of on a hiatus. And I remember you came down and did like a Wednesday night shift from just to get used to the board and the format. And we just a couple hours just to get comfy. You hadn't been on the air for a while, so let's just give it a go. And I remember the station Facebook page exploding. Like, "Jay's back." Like 400 comments or something. "Oh my God, Jay Sharp's back." And people were sharing the link and everything.
Yeah, I remember it was so cool.
And I remember phoning Don Conway, our station owner, saying, "Have you seen what's going on the radio?" Because you'd only opened your mouth about 3 times at that point, and the place was exploding. And I said, "I think we got to talk about something bigger." And so Don and myself and Sandy Davis, who is a part of our management team and / consultant at the time, were like, "Let's see if Jay's interested in doing mornings again." And it went from like filling in a couple evening shifts on the weekend to moving into mornings a couple weeks later. And I remember that you were a little trepidatious about going back to mornings.
Mm-hmm.
Just because it takes a toll, right?
You know just as well as I do how much of a toll it does take. It changes your lifestyle. And it's just a different lifestyle. You're out of step with everybody else. That's one thing you have to do doing the morning show. You're tired all the time. aware of how much sleep you have to get if you want to go out on a weeknight or something, all stuff. So when I did the Wolf mornings for 10 years, I think 10 or 11 years. And when I hadn't been doing it for about a year and a half when you called me, and I wasn't really sure I wanted to go back to that routine.
It took a bit of convincing.
I remember saying to you, you said, we'd love to have you come on full time. Is there anything you'd like to do? And I said, anything but mornings. And your face just dropped. And I said, that's the option, I guess.
What if we asked you to go to mornings? Would you like that? Would mornings be okay? I think I just ignored what you said and kept asking about mornings.
You did.
Because that led into that move to mornings led into a partnership with Meg Murphy, who you and I shared as a co-host for years, which through the magic of Skype and stuff was such a bizarre setup. But
yeah,
I count it as kind of a gift in that Meg went on to become one of our best friends. We had all kinds of crazy adventures over the years. But I think working with someone on the air that you share chemistry with is rare. And you can't create it. You can't force it. It just is kind of there. And I remember the first time you and Meg went on the air, like it was pretty instantaneous.
Yes, it felt very comfortable, relaxed. You immediately sense that you're working with someone who's on your wavelength, someone you can trust on the air to throw stuff back and forth with.
Well, and you guys got to know each other so well off air that there was such an understanding of each other's personality. Like you guys, your characters on the air were not very much different than off the air. Like you're sort of the same mischievous, sort of weird, dark sense of humor off the air that you are on the air. And Meg's not. Like that was the best part. You guys were so different in so many different ways that you could poke fun at each other, you could have fun with each other, you could support each other, you could trash each other, and it all just sounded natural.
Yeah, I'm Mr. Pessimism and she was Miss Optimism. It was hilarious.
Excuse me.
And so that was, you're right. It is, I didn't realize how incredibly difficult it is to encounter people that you work well with together on the air. And it happens, it's hard to find because most often the station just wants to pair you up with someone that's in the position and they don't care about the chemistry. It's
does it fit the pay? Does it fit the pay scale? Good, you're in.
Yeah, exactly. And they don't, I can't blame them for not caring if there's chemistry. Make it work. We'll have some meetings and we'll figure this out. And it, you can make a passable product. Totally. But when you work with someone that you're in step with, it just takes it to a whole other level. And I think it's probably more of a pleasure to listen to as much as it is to do, because there is that history together and the knowledge of each other and familiarity or whatever.
Well, and because you guys are both from the community and had such deep connections around the community, like you knew sort of each other's circles or people in those circles. So it made referencing stuff easier. You didn't have to educate each other on the market or the situation. But I think both of you guys bring to the table a skill that I don't think you can teach. And there's an improv ability that you guys both have to think on your feet, that if, I got lucky with that with Meg too on our side, because if I was having a bad day, she'd pick up the slack and vice versa. And I think you guys had a very similar dynamic, that you knew if one was having a rough day, that the other one was going to be there to sort of pick up the slack. Or if you threw something out there, you knew there was going to be a yes and the thing would move forward. It wasn't just going to get torpedoed and there'd be awkward silence afterwards.
Yeah, exactly. There was a certain security in going on the air, knowing that I don't know what's going to happen here, but something will, because we just are somebody's going to give it an ending. Somebody's going to button it up. Somebody's going to bring something to the party that's going to carry it along. That when you don't have that, that's when it's a real tough slog, because it doesn't come as naturally. You're like to come up with, are you finished talking? Should I go to commercial now?
Yeah.
No, did I talk there? You get all this awkward.
But I think the other thing too was like there was no sense of fighting for airtime. Like you can hear that in some morning shows where one host is trying to get the airtime versus another one, as opposed to just having a morning conversation, right? Like around, you can hear that in the product. And I think there never was any of that with you guys. There certainly wasn't on our side either. And then you took that. One of the things I liked about your show is that you could always take something that seemed simple or normal or inane and make it entertaining and funny. And I remember you brought Sean Savoy into the show our morning. He was our engineer at the time, but he had done kind of every job in the building, but he was moving on from on-air stuff to becoming our engineer. And you guys created a bit called the Fireside Chat. Do you remember? And for people that never heard the Fireside Chat, it was a bit where Jay played these sound effects of a crackling fire and tinkling drinks, and he and Sean sounded like they were sitting around the campfire, and they would talk about whatever the subject was that you would bring up. And you never told Savvy what it was going to be, which I thought was the funniest part of the bit, because he just sounded like a guy that walked into the room and the mic was on. Right?
Yeah.
Like,
if you could, hey, Savvy, it's good to see you. Yeah, I'll have a gold one. If you could be any Sesame Street character, who would it be and why? To be like, what?
And then he would just go with it. Right?
Yeah.
But do you remember the handwritten letter we got, complaint to the CRTC we got about that bit?
I remember you bringing me, it was from a lady who was appalled that we were drinking at that time of the day.
Angry that we were allowing you to drive home drunk after the morning show.
Yeah, because that bit would run 6:40, 6:20 sometimes. So that was, to me, the humor was we're cracking.
Totally.
We're hanging. It's like, 1 a.m. on a Friday morning or something when we were doing.
She was so outraged, and I remember the letter was handwritten, and she had no contact information on it, because I would have to call her afterwards as part of the management team and say, hey, what's your concern? What's your thing? But she didn't put any contact info on it. I kept the letter.
Did you really?
I may still have it in a box somewhere, because it was just so virulent. She was so angry that you drunks were doing a morning show around a campfire in the back. She literally thought you were in the backyard of the radio station with the 401 whizzing in the background.
Yeah.
You're out there having cocktails around the fire.
Yeah.
It was just such great theater.
I was defensive at first, because that's always my gut reaction when someone complains. It's like, oh, you. But then you said, I guess this means you win. Those sound effects convinced this lady. Yeah, that's true. That's a great point.
But that was part of the beauty of the theater of it. And you used to use those sound effects. What used to kill me was that you'd do an interview with somebody from the community on like a Wednesday, and then air the interview on Friday, and you'd throw sound effects in that they had no idea we're going to be in the interview. So to the listener, there's this like boing or something in the background in the middle of an interview, and the person just carries on like nothing happened.
Well, I would put in sound effects like I'm rummaging in the fridge for a beverage while they're explaining what their event's going to be. I'd be like, yeah. And do you want one? I've got a cold one in here. So you put all that stuff.
Because in essence, it was sort of anti-morning radio. You know what I mean? Like you're doing a feel-good interview about a community event, which on our side, on the Star side, hey, tell us about your event. How's it going? And we plug the event and stuff like that. On your side, you're like, hang on, I'm going to get a drink. You keep talking.
It was to cover up my lack of professionalism. So just embrace the amateur hour. And because I have a terrible attention span sometimes, or I don't know if you found this when you're interviewing people, you've got a whole bunch of things going on in your mind because you're recording. You've got to technically be on top of it. You've got to know what they're talking about. So that was kind of my way of distracting myself.
Because I remember we had Linda Kay in from United Way one time, and in the middle of the interview, like you literally got up and walked across the room to get something, and she kind of paused and then just kept going, like it was just, okay, this is how we do things on this side.
Yeah, it was like, welcome to my sandbox. This is how we play in this place. And people were pretty about it. It was, it was fun, especially when you'd preface the interview by asking what their tipple was, and they'd always come up with some crazy drink that I'd pretend to mix in the back.
Right.
When you kind of felt like you got to know them.
And the funny part was, like, because we had regular guests, when you first would ask them, they're like, Pepsi? You're like, no, a stiff one. Like, what do you want? And then you go like screwdriver. And then eventually you train them to the point where everybody just played along.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And there wasn't any actual drink.
They'd come in with their drink list all ready to go. I thought of a great one.
Because you were doing an interview one time. I remember listening to it. And in the middle of the interview, she's going on about whatever the event was. And you're like, how's your drink? Is it the right mix? And she just played along with it. Even there's no drink anywhere, but she just played along. And I just thought it was just such great theater that for the listener listening at home, there's a comedic aspect of the absurdity of giving someone a drink at 7:30 in the morning on live radio.
Yeah.
And the fact that everybody just went, oh, this is how we do things on the classic rock side with Jay. So I guess we'll play along.
Yeah. It was great. Some people really embraced it. Some people were weirded out by it. But most times when people heard the finished product, they were like, oh, I get what you were doing there. Okay. Yeah. Because it's all about what I was really trying to do was to make it interesting as I possibly could.
Yeah. Which 99% of the time you hit it out of the park. Obviously, when you're getting complaints from the CRTC about drinking at 6:30 in the morning, I think you might have hit your mark. So, I want to talk about something a little bit different because it's a portion of your personality that has always fascinated me. And I used to joke with Meg that, oh shit, the 10:30 escape is coming, because whenever we had like a function or a station lunch or something like that, you would vanish by like 10:30. You just couldn't wait to get out of the building. And where is that rooted in? Is that like a nervousness? Is it an anxiousness? Is it just, I don't want to be around the people because I'm exhausted because I drove in at 3:30 in the morning? Like, I've already been here 8 hours. Like, where did that, I was always fascinated by that because everybody was so excited to see you. And I'm like, Jay left.
Bringing disappointment to the people.
Where does that come from? Like, it was our people.
I'm a very introverted person. I don't think of myself as very socially adept. So that comes with the anxiety and, I just think it's just being an introverted person and preferring to not have to go through the social.
Well, you bring up the introvert thing before, because I'm generally not an introvert, but I found when as I got later in my radio career and I started to burn out and it was affecting my health, I did some sort of internal research, like, what is it about this job that got you into it? And I think I loved the performance aspect and the fun of radio without having to be in front of an audience.
Right.
And I'm wondering from your standpoint, because you talk about being an introvert, and I think by nature you are, but when people would listen to your show, it's the polar opposite. Like, I mean, you're not a different person, you're still Jay, but you have this ability to perform in front of people with no fear about pretty much any topic in your life. Like, you guys got pretty raw at times with stuff that you did that I wouldn't dare go near. And I find that really interesting that you had that freedom of self to do that in front of a radio audience, but not if you were to be put in front of an audience. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think it's because you're in a room by yourself with a microphone and maybe a co-host, and you're pretty isolated. Like when I talk on the air, you probably got this lesson too. It was like, envision one person. You're talking to one person. You're not talking to a group of people. It's one person and listening to the radio. So that was my imaginary audience. So you don't feel that kind of same anxiety or stress or stage fright or whatever.
Right.
It becomes your own little room. And I certainly was aware people listen. You get emails, you get phone calls and stuff like that. But it's still isolated. So it's not the same as going on stage at Peterborough Music Fest or something.
Right.
I
found the bigger the crowd, the calmer I was.
It's weird. I was going to say that the bigger the crowd, because you can't differentiate between the people. It's just a mass. It's just a wall of faces. So it's like, not as
to do 12,000-15,000 people at Music Fest. I felt comfortable. To do like the YMCA golf tournament, terrifying.
I would be terrified at our lunch meetings at the station when Don Conway put me on in an effort to get me to do more social stuff. He put me on the social committee or something.
Right.
Like
And you had to come up with social ideas.
I'd have to come up with social ideas and events and stuff like that. I would be terrified in those meetings, waiting for him to go at, after talking to this department, this part. And Jay, what do you have planned? I would just be sitting there terrified, even if, regardless of whether I had an idea or not. It was just like, oh, I don't want all eyes on me. I don't want to have to say anything. I'm not in, I just want to blend into the scenery.
Right. You're like the Homer Simpson meme.
Yeah, exactly. That's me. That was me every time Don said, Jay, what have you have planned? Into the bushes.
When you look back on that time, and when you look back on morning radio and stuff like that, and you realize that like there was corporations and business people behind all of this, I am often shocked at the level of freedom we had to do pretty much anything we wanted to do, as long as we didn't put the license in jeopardy.
Mm-hmm.
Like there was never anybody going, don't do that. And I don't know if that's rare in radio. Like, I just feel like we were pretty spoiled at that time.
Yeah, I've always marveled at the support we had from those in charge to do whatever creative endeavor or idea we wanted to do. They were so supportive of any ideas we brought to the table. It was amazing. It was a great freedom. I don't know if that's still the case, but it was, I loved it. It was great.
Yeah, because I've heard, you hear horror stories from other stations where you got a program director or a manager or something that wants to sort of put their stamp on the show, and they want you to go this way and do this kind of thing. And I just found that for a business that generates that kind of revenue, there was a remarkable amount of trust given that we wouldn't screw it up.
Yes, yeah, you're right.
Right? Like, try and imagine if you own a $3 million car, and some kid that you've hired to wash it is in charge of that car. And then that kid has to drive the car every day and do all your business for you to help generate revenue to pay for the car. And never once do you say to the kid, hey, how fast were you going there?
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, did you hit anything today?
Yeah.
I just found it remarkable, the level of trust. It was such a great environment to work in without knowing that you had the backing of the ownership group and the management staff. That was always reassuring.
It made waking up bearable again. Like we talked about how I didn't want to do it. It was the support that made me want to do it.
Really?
That made it, I wanted to rise to the challenge. And I was like, wow, these guys think I can do it. And I'm going to do it. I'm going to get up. Let's see if I can do it for a year. And, then it's another year and another year. And that was the huge factor in it, that it was the support and the encouragement and the trust, I think. I
remember your first night on the air was, I got kind of like the first night on the air with us, because I'd listened to you on The Wolf for years. I had followed your career and kind of knew kind of what was happening. I'd never kind of appreciated your ability for taking something simple and making it entertaining. And I think I've told you this story before, but I used to use it when I used to go to Loyalist College and talk to students. I used to use it as an example, because you took a generic station liner that we had about who was doing the morning show at the time. Mike Cutting, I think, was doing the morning show.
Yeah.
And it was like, Mike's got this and this and this coming up tomorrow morning. And you took a basic liner that would be a throwaway for 99% of air staff going, hey, tune in with Mike tomorrow because he's got blank, blank, blank. And you were reading I remember listening to it. You're reading the liner going, listen, if you like this, I don't have it. Mike has it tomorrow morning. Like you took everything as a negative and flipped it. Like,
I don't remember that. That's funny.
Do you remember it?
No, I don't remember that.
You were like, hey, tomorrow morning, listen, if you really like trivia, this isn't the place for it. I don't have it. Mike Cutting's got trivia tomorrow morning in the morning show.
Right.
And you took this totally generic 3-point BS throwaway liner and made it hilarious. And I was like, so I use that as an example moving forward.
Wow, that's cool.
And I was like, this is, well, because remember, you spoke to my Loyalist class.
Yeah, I remember that.
And I told them that story before the interview. I said, this is an example. Like when you've got a liner for whatever the community event is, you can throw it away or you can make it engaging. And I used to tell that story, and it was just, but I remember thinking to myself, who looks at the liner sheet and goes, I'm going to turn this into a negative and make it hilarious? Like
I never thought that way.
You can't teach that, is what I'm saying. And I think that is one of the things that made you so endearing and so and so popular for so long was your ability to take something ordinary and do something with it that made it entertaining. And I was wondering, was that a conscious choice that you made through the years when you saw stuff like that, or was it just the way that you view things?
I think it's just the way that I view things. I'm kind of a contrarian person.
Right.
So I think I just look at things in a skewed way. I certainly didn't think of it, break it down and I'm going to do it in a negative way. It really is more trying to amuse myself, Some of the funniest things I think happen is when you're doing the mundane things or the boring things.
Right.
You're just trying to amuse yourself or make it different than the last 100 times you've said this bit or whatever.
It's so true. It's so true. I remember one of the great things I remember about working with you was that there would be times when I'd get fired up about something. I don't know what it would be. I'd be pissed about something, or I'd be like angry about something, and I'd get a bit ranty. And then like you would come in with just this like bullet arrow, just blast my balloon out of the air and just bring me back down to earth again in one. And I don't know if I'm sure you'll remember it when I tell you. Do you remember that it was 6:05 in the morning? And do you remember the incident at the Campbellford Legion when a bunch of guys showed up for the Halloween thing and they were dressed in blackface?
Oh, yes, I do remember that.
Do you remember how it ended?
Yes, and it was you were talking about outrageous Halloween costumes. And
I was doing a rant about how injustice was, how stupid it was. And
it was ridiculous. And then you said, anyway, coming up next, it's Hoobastank. Was that?
You remember the band? I can't believe you remember. I'm like, and Hoobastank is next. And I remember you listening on the other side, and you came back and you hit the talk back, and you're like, Hoobastank's pretty good, eh?
It was just such a great contrast to what you were saying up to that point.
It was so bad. It was so bad. Because I remember at those times, like there's this whole sense of importance and injustice, and we have to shine light on this and everything. And you're on the other side of the glass, just like, no, you're not. Oh, by the way, it's 6:08 in the morning.
It was great. I thought what you were doing was awesome. And I always marveled at how you could take something like that and riff off the top of your head. That's not a strength. I don't think I have that strength.
Oh, I disagree.
You could just riff, and you were riffing and you were getting fired up and you were making these great points and da-da-da-da, and you said, yeah, it's just outrageous as it happening. Anyway, coming up next, Hoobastank.
Yeah.
It's just such a contrast.
And the funny part is, like, I remember you making fun of me about the Hoobastank thing for days after. Like, it's seared into my brain because because the way you had mocked me about it was just so perfect. I'm like, what are you taking yourself so seriously for, dude? You're on a pop radio station at 6:05 in the morning. Nobody's solving the world's injustices. Like, just totally brought me back down to earth, and you're not a big deal. It was great.
I think I didn't mean for it to be like that extreme, but I think what happened was you became my Mike Melnick. Suddenly,
oh God, no! You tortured Melnick way more than me. I'm so grateful for that. It could have got way worse. It could have got way worse.
He was too much of a good sport.
I want to talk a little bit about quickly your obsession with Elvis Presley. You have been to Graceland, have you not?
Twice, yes. I've been to Graceland twice.
What is your fascination with the king of rock and roll?
I think he's a cool dude. He was a super cool dude. My parents were into him. So I grew up listening to his tunes, and it wasn't just my parents. It seemed like back in the 70s, everybody loved Elvis. He was just played all the time, you know, like from his early rock and roll stuff to his pop stuff in the 60s to his operatic stuff in the 70s. And then I think just as I grew up, I became more and more. Oh, it's funny you bring him up. I was just sitting at the old piano here.
Oh, nicely done. Because my father has an Elvis Presley obsession that is second to none. Yeah, when he worked at Fleming College, people used to go away on vacation and they would bring him back Elvis paraphernalia.
Yeah, I don't think mine was an obsession. Like, I loved his tunes and stuff. And, around the time I was rediscovering him, CD box sets were coming out. So you could get like everything he did in the 50s. Then I started loving that. But I think it becomes something that, people buy you as gifts. It's like they associate, oh, well, he loves Elvis. So then you start to amass this collection that you didn't intend to. But
did you not end up meeting was it his recording engineer or was it Sun Studios? You met somebody down there that was connected to him, I thought. I could be mistaken.
I don't remember meeting anyone. John Eaton met a lot of people associated with him because he used to do the Elvis Fest in Collingwood.
Right.
But no, I can't. I don't think I met anyone from Elvis.
Oh, maybe not. But you did have a pretty personal connection to SCTV.
Yeah,
Jules Hallmeyer.
Yeah,
which is a crazy friendship.
It was funny because I was an SCTV fan for years, and I'm a huge John Candy fan. Have been a John Candy fan for years as well, but really loved SCTV. Found Jewel on Facebook and thought I should reach out to him and play the radio card. I never do that, but this is the perfect opportunity to say, hey, do you want to be on my show? And that's a great way to get, to meet somebody. So I reached out to him and said, would you be interested in being a guest on my show to talk about your days in SCTV? And he wrote back and said, well, I'm not supposed to because I'm doing a documentary and I'm legally bound to not talk to anyone outside of it, but sure, let's do it.
Which I think after you met Jewel for 5 minutes is pretty much the exact response he would give.
Exactly.
But like you ended up going to Toronto and getting tours of the old SCTV costume warehouse. And
yeah, his business was a museum of costumes from not just SCTV, but from Canadian television for decades. It was fascinating to see all the stuff that, everything in his shop has a piece of history to it.
Yeah.
So, but to put on John Candy's Johnny LaRue jacket was amazing.
I remember you texted me the picture and I was like, is that the real Johnny LaRue jacket? And you're going, yeah, it feels awesome.
Yeah. It was fit like a glove.
Right.
Which made my doctor concerned, but
in a good way.
Yeah. It was cool though. He had all the, Martin Short, he's got stories from all these people he's worked with, and we became friends over the years. Really.
You've had an amazing journey through radio, through local radio, through regional radio, through you've done some video work, you've done some vocal work, some VO work, that kind of thing. I'll ask you the same question I get asked probably weekly, and do you miss any of it?
I'm still doing some vocal stuff. I still do commercials and stuff every now and then. I still have my toe in that area, but as far as radio, I don't miss radio at this point. I feel like I had a really good run between the two stations. It's almost 30 years in Peterborough and Coburg and Port Hope, like in the area. It's a long time to stay somewhere. And I probably ran out of things to say about 15 years ago. So
that's why I had a co-host.
I never really got into radio because I wanted attention. Like I wasn't really, I didn't lose myself when I got out of radio. Right. It was like, I enjoyed it when I was doing it. And I loved working with you, loved working with Meg, and worked with really great people. But then when you're not doing it, you're living your life, and that's the way it is.
Well, because I get asked about it a lot, and I kind of knew, like when I left, like I was burnt out. I could feel myself becoming cancerous. I didn't feel good about the position, and I think it's 22 years of burnout, right? And
yeah,
and I think I'd kind of just went, okay, that chapter of my life's over, turn the page and move forward. And I never got the itch. Like I never wondered. I love doing this because I get to chat with friends and people I know and tell interesting stories and sort of people that have lived interesting lives, but there's no parameters. Like we can just sit and chat till we're done talking. And and if somebody watches it, great. If nobody watches it, great. I still had a great conversation. Like there's no pressure behind it. I think that's really what I like the most about it. And I'm really
say that that because I found that sometimes when you take what you do, like doing something for pleasure and making that your job, you lose the joy in why you did that in the first place.
Right.
So leaving a 9-to-5 job and coming back, and now I'll putter away on audio stuff that has nothing to do with radio, but it's fun and it's just for me and it's a blast, you know. So you kind of keep your.
What's that?
Sorry,
I missed what you said.
You kind of keep your toe in it a little bit. I bet you do too. That you're kind of. It never leaves you, but
no,
I feel that it's essential anymore.
When I look back on my radio career, one of the things I'm most grateful for was I got to have some pretty awesome conversations and got to meet some pretty awesome people that I would never have otherwise crossed paths with.
Mm-hmm.
You being one of them, Murphy being another one, but people in the community that had great stories to tell. And there was some tragedy, there was a lot of triumph, a lot of community. Like you were kind of the hub, you're at the central part of and you got to meet people you would never cross paths with. And I that's the part of radio I think I missed, was the people part of it. So when we do stuff like this and we're just messing around, chatting and sort of talking about where you were and where you got to and where you're going, like it's just, there's an ease about it there because there's no pressure to, oh God, I got to fit it in 3 minutes and 44 seconds.
Yeah, exactly.
Or I got to take a 30-minute interview and cut it down to 4 minutes. Yeah, that's great.
Right.
Exactly. I don't miss that. But that's not because we got pressure from management and other people in the community. That's the pressure of working in the format and having to hit news times and stuff like that, right? Like that's just the nature of the medium.
Yeah.
Which, you know, I like I said, I miss the people. I certainly don't miss getting up at 4:30. And you had a commute in from Peterborough. My commute was like 4 cars at Tim Hortons. Like I remember blazing in at like 5:58 some mornings, and you're on the other side of the glass laughing at me.
I would roar. Yeah, it was hilarious. The one thing one thing I do miss is creating something for like piece for the show that you're really excited to share.
Yeah.
And you have that audience. It's an amazing thing to be able to do something and share it sometimes instantaneously. You know, that's radio is so great for that. You can go, oh, I'm going to try this, and you go on the air and do it. And you know, you don't have that outlet anymore, and that's one thing I miss too.
I think you should start a podcast with Savvy and call it the Fireside Chat.
That's a great idea.
Right. And then you two clowns could just sit down, put a microphone around Friday night and just riff for 2 hours and then post it on the internet.
Yeah, to help with sound effects, break out the real thing.
You don't have to worry about CRTC complaints.
Yeah, that's right.
So before we let you go, what's a day in the life like for you now? It's a lot more peaceful, a lot slower, a different pace of life, and you've sort of changed your focus a bit.
Yeah, it's a lot different now. I think I said this to you before. Now my life is a lot of movies and video games. I call it Death's Waiting Room. This is where there's some lovely reading material here. And
Death's Waiting Room. That's the name of your podcast.
Death's Waiting Room. That's not a bad idea. We're renting out our cottage, so I kind of doing that and being a handyman. But yeah, it's pretty quiet. It's like my wife is still working when I became unexpectedly retired at 48. She brings home the bacon and I provide the love make.
Oh, that's smooth.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Smooth. Plus you have more dogs now, right? Like are you turning into crazy dog people?
Yeah, we are. We have a cat named Monkey, we have a pug named Dewey, and a boxer named Jack. And yeah, so walking the dogs keeps me busy.
We have one dog, and we swore we're not going to be those people. We're not going to be like dog people.
Right.
We're so far beyond what would be considered normal now. It's almost embarrassing. Like last year for Christmas, Anne's son bought us like a blanket with a picture of our dog Jack on the blanket that now sits at the end of our bed that the dog sleeps on his own face. Yeah,
it's pointless to try and resist. You just become crazy dog people.
We have my son's friend is an artist, took a picture of Jack off the internet and then painted his picture, and that hangs in our bedroom.
Oh, wow, that's cool.
Now we went to the Golden Rescue picnic because we got Jack from a rescue. We went to the Golden Rescue picnic, and that's where we thought we're never going to be crazy dog people, because there is some crazy dog people. And we saw people walking around with like hats and sweatshirts with their dog's picture on it. And we're like, we're never going to be those people. And 4 months later, we have a blanket with the dog's face on it that sits on our bed.
Yeah, it happens. It comes up on you. You don't even see it coming.
You can't, you're right, though. You can't resist it, right? So
I think we're doing back here. I don't know if you can see. Can you see behind me?
yeah. Where's Dewbird? Is he there?
I
Oh,
don't
there's
know.
the painting. Yeah, there's the
Yeah, there's a
painting.
big wall-size picture of Dewey there.
Yeah.
So we don't have the blanket, but we're right beside you with the crazy dog people.
Yeah, it feels a bit much. It feel, like
They're part of the family. What can you do? You love them like they're part of the family.
they're kids, right? Like they're like your
Yeah.
kids. They, you know, because we're almost empty nesters now. So Jack is turned into the 7th child that we have, and he'll be treated. Thank God he doesn't have to go to university. That's good.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, so you're right. I spend at least an hour of the day doing something outdoors with the dog, which gets me out of this room, which is good.
Yeah, that's good. It's a great excuse to get out and exercise and have fun with the dog for an hour.
Awesome. Any closing thoughts?
Well, I want to say thanks to you for giving me a chance. 11 years ago or 10 years ago or whatever it was. That was amazing.
It wasn't me. It was going to be somebody else. So I just beat them to it.
No, I don't know about that, but it was a total, I didn't see it coming, and it turned into being a decade-long
Dude,
adventure.
I just ground you down until you said yes. Just
Yeah.
chiseled you right down.
Yeah, you're unrelenting. Unbelievable. But that's it. I've got nothing.
Enjoy your dog fandom.
Thank you.
Well, we should tell people about your SoundCloud account, because you're doing, like, you're producing songs now of cover tunes. It's freaky.
I started learning piano when the lockdown started. And about a year ago, I guess I started. I've been using an app and playing away and sticking with it. So
Good for you.
keep me into it. I've been recording cover tunes and learning GarageBand. And that's been a little bit of a creative outlet too.
That's awesome. That's awesome.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun. And John helps me out with those too. I send him the links and he adds his own instruments to it and stuff.
Yeah, because John Eaton can play like 9 instruments.
Yeah, he's amazing.
While wearing a kilt.
And nothing underneath, which I find distasteful, but
Sadly, I'm aware of
what
that.
can you do?
Totally aware of that. It's that's not a lie. That is the truth. Listen, my friend, say hi to Sue for us, and thank you for sharing some of your journey with us. And it was just great. You and I haven't talked pretty much since I walked out of the radio station in 2018. So this is the first time we've actually sat and chatted, and
I know.
It's been awesome. And I'm really grateful you took the time to do this with me. Thanks for sharing.
Oh, thanks for having me. It's always a pleasure talking to you. It's nice to reconnect.